How's it going, everybody? Good. Who was here for the last panel? Hacksaw. That guy got out of here really fast. I think he was intimidated of us.
I think so too.
Yeah.
I would be too.
Yeah.
We're pretty scary people.
My name's Scott. This is my friend.
My name's Simeon. Nice to meet you guys.
We are Two Button Crew, a group of Nintendo fans. We've done some stuff on YouTube. We've also been at Comic-Con last year. And this year we're doing something really special today. Simeon, what are we going to be doing?
We are going to be doing the great Nintendo debate, the be-all, end-all, at least for now, debate of which is better, classic Nintendo or modern Nintendo.
Okay, so just to make sure, everyone in the audience, Nintendo fans, right?
Nintendo fans. You gotta have Nintendo fans. Okay, good.
Okay, cool. Well, it's a much debated topic, whether retro or modern Nintendo is better. So one of us is going to represent retro, that'd be Simeon, and one of us is going to represent modern Nintendo, that's me, Scott. And Simeon, how are we defining those?
So we decided to split it at GameCube. So GameCube and Game Boy Advance is off the table. Everything before that, so early 2001 previous is retro. Everything after, so Wii up to current day, is all on the modern side.
Okay. Question, that's great.
Do we include virtual console games as retro or modern?
That's a good question,
Do
Scott.
we include virtual console games as retro or modern? It's going to be a little unfair if I, arguing for modern, got to include virtual console, because I would basically just say I have all of your stuff and more, so that's going to be off limits. If you only got to play games that were created from a certain time or a different certain time. Yeah, so a little bit of information about how it's going to go today. We're going to go over the rules. That's what we're doing right now. Then we're going to each have 5 minutes for opening statements. Then we'll get to provide some counter arguments for each other. And then we'll have audience questions. So if you feel like one of us could explain something better, or you want to bring up your own point that we can answer and do our best to argue for our own sides, we'll do that. We have plenty of time for audience questions, so just be thinking of those.
Be thinking about that.
And then we will vote, and you guys actually get to decide who wins the debate. We will do raise of hands. So throughout this time, be thinking if you agree with Simeon that retro gaming is better, or with me that modern gaming is better, as far as Nintendo goes. Any questions? Are we good?
Any questions?
Like NES Classic or SNES Classic, is that modern?
Classic editions.
Classic editions are not considered modern.
Uh-oh.
Yes. Star Fox 2, I don't think we'll be factoring into the debate too much.
Because it's
There's
not that
quite a
good.
bit.
Okay, and I'll let you have opening statements.
All right.
One last thing for me is that Simeon and I have been friends for about 18 years now. So even after I serve him up this humiliating defeat today,
Sure.
I'll still invite him over for dinner once in a while. So don't feel bad for us. This will be friendly banter.
We'll see about that. Okay, so let's get into it. So I have 5 main arguments, okay? And we'll just go down the list. First of all, classic games simply stand the test of time. They have been around for a while, they're still played, they're still loved, they stand the test of time. Even decades after their release, people are still playing them, and they're returned to more than any modern game is. Modern games pass, they come and go very quickly. Second of all, the Nintendo seal of approval. Yes, I'm going to make a big deal of the Nintendo seal of approval. It was there for a reason. First party games were distinct. That was another thing that we didn't go over, is we're not just debating first party games, we're debating games that appeared on Nintendo consoles as
So
well.
no matter
That
what
does
company
factor into it.
developed them, Capcom, Konami, whoever.
Yes, those are included. First party games, they were very distinct. You can look at them, you can say, that's a Nintendo game, just from seeing it. Very few other companies captured the magic that like Nintendo did. Konami did sometimes, Capcom did sometimes, but very few. Third-party games had to work to earn that seal of approval. Not just any game got the Nintendo seal of approval. There was a reason that the seal existed. Third-party and indie games are not Nintendo exclusive now. If you look at most indie developers, which are basically now third-party developers, and a lot of third-party games now, they appear on multiple consoles. It's not just Nintendo. They spread it around so you can get it elsewhere as well. Number 3, quality is better than quantity. More games are released now, yes, but the games back then had more quality to it. The amount of Wii shovelware that you had to wade through to get to the good stuff was preposterous. The Switch Online store may be a little bit better, but it's still plagued by shovelware. And I don't know if you guys have ever heard of Vroom in the Night Sky, but it is an absolute travesty to see something like that on a Nintendo Online service. If you were to ask someone, which I did this week at a restaurant, I asked my waiter, what their fondest multiplayer memories were in specific, what console are they going to think of? N64, okay? Everybody remembers playing Mario Kart on 64, GoldenEye, stuff like that. If you ask somebody about that, they're going to go off about all the fun games on the console. Do you know how many games were released for N64? 296. Only 296 games on the whole platform, and yet the quality is there. The focus was on the quality. Number 4, with more technology comes more complications. I could go home, plug my Retron, which I play my retro stuff on. I plug my Retron into the wall, slap in the controller, slap in the game, and play. That's it. I might have to give a little TLC to the cartridge, but I will be able to get it to work in just a few minutes. The Wii needed extra cords and required a wireless controller, which required batteries. Are you taking your Wii with you and you forgot your sensor bar? Better light some candles. Your batteries are dead? Well, you're out of luck. Can't play. The Wii U was even worse. It had the gamepad. You forgot to bring the gamepad with you, or it's out of batteries, you're out of luck. You moved more than 10 feet away from your console, you're out of range. Your dog gnawed through one of the 4 cables necessary for running your device. Better go and buy a new one. That actually happened to me. The Switch did fix some of the problems, but it still has major technology issues, major hardware issues. You use the wrong cable, your Switch is bricked. If you use the wrong charging cable on your Switch, you have to buy a new Switch, new console. You're not going to run into that issue with an NES or SNES. You want to play on your couch? Well, that's okay until you have to send your Pro Controller in for repairs, which Scott just had to do, and they couldn't even fix the controller. They had to send him a new one because...
No hassle.
Yes. Okay. You want to use your Joy-Con? Well, enjoy grappling with the problems of having a wireless controller. Want to connect the Joy-Con to the console and play handheld? That typically works, but you still run the risk of the Joy-Con going haywire on you, even when it's connected to the console. We deal with that every single day at lunch break. You want to bypass this? You have to pay some extra money to get an adapter so you can use a controller from 3 console generations ago. In other words, you have to go before the modern era to find a controller that will actually work for you.
How's your 5-minute timer looking there, Slappy?
It's going great. Is wireless technology worth it? No. Lastly, the reason the NES Classic sold out immediately at launch. There's a reason for it. There's a reason a year later the SNES Classic sold out immediately at launch. There's a reason they've recreated the SNES controller so many times. Modern games leave us wanting more from our games. They leave us wanting the classics.
Oh, it's okay. Save your applause to the end. Save it. Were you at our panel last year, sir? Were you Deadpool? I recognized him. I get his vote.
I recognize him too.
Okay. I'm going to try to actually stick to my 5 minutes. Okay, so first I'd like to go over some pros of modern gaming before I get to some cons of retro Nintendo gaming. With modern consoles, you get the latest and greatest. You get what is coming out now. You get to be a part of conversations of everybody playing the same game at the same time. You get to follow news, you get to listen to podcasts. With retro games, all of that has already passed by now, and you've probably already played all of the best stuff from back in the day. Also, the graphics, of course, are better these days. You're not going to hurt your eyes looking at any jagged pixels. It's one of many things that are better with modern Nintendo games, just like soundtracks. In the old days, it just used to be beeps and boops. And now we've got orchestrated soundtracks. The music is more immersive, gets you into the game, and basically it's delivering like a movie-like experience that you get to be a part of. There's also downloadable content. That was something that was added as far as Nintendo goes, I think in the Wii U era and now the Switch. Downloadable content is great because if a game sells well, the developers get to, instead of moving on to the next job and churning out another NES game in 4 more months, they get to keep working on their passion project, develop even more levels, and sometimes the DLC is even free. So you get to enjoy your games longer. There are amiibo that unlock additional functionality. So in the olden days, you could never really get Mario figurines and stuff unless it was like a Mexican knockoff. These days, you get the official thing that you can actually scan into your game and unlock more levels or harder difficulties, that kind of thing. You can also buy games digitally. Simeon himself is a digital games lover. Not possible on NES, SNES, or N64. But now you can purchase games from the convenience of your home. You don't have to worry about things going out of stock. You can take advantage of great digital sales, and you won't lose your games. I did enjoy my NES, but I lost it in an attic. I left a box of NES games in an attic, and if those were downloaded games, I couldn't have lost them, unless I lost the whole console, but I wouldn't do that, right? There's also more controllers and more ports these days. With NES and SNES, you could only play with 2 people, or else you had to buy a dongle to allow you to plug in more controllers. These days, out of the box, a Nintendo system will let you play with at least 4 people, and now it's even going up to like 8, which is more friends than I even have. So I'm set. And now I pose to you a question. What company has been around for 30 years and just gotten worse? Doesn't really happen. Nintendo, like any company that's been able to survive, iterates. They make better products as the years go on. They build off of what they were able to do in the past and create better things. Their bank account has just grown and grown and grown. And they're able to use what they learned from the retro gaming days, and they're able to apply that to and use it with modern technology. So to me, the math just adds up to better games, or else they would be out of business. Wii was a cultural phenomenon. We couldn't have a debate like this without spending a minute on Nintendo Wii. It is the best-selling Nintendo console, which is telling in and of itself, but it also got the whole family involved. Grandma and grandpa, they'd play Wii bowling. Everybody knew what the Wii was. I've seen there's actually billboards of old people playing with Wii remotes in retirement homes. You would never see them with a retro controller. Also, some of the best games that we've ever played are modern day. Examples, just a few: Super Mario Galaxy 1 and 2. Compare those 2 games to Super Mario Bros. 1 and 2 and think about which ones you'd rather go back to. I do play Super Mario Bros. Once in a while, but I only last about 5 minutes before it becomes frustrating. Super Mario Galaxy is just so much larger, so much more to explore, more levels, more to do, more to collect. How about this? Breath of the Wild, compare that to the original Legend of Zelda. It's not really a comparison. Breath of the Wild, you'll be able to play over and over again for years to come, always different and new ways to play it. It is like the pinnacle of that series. I might be out of time now. I'll save my cons of retro Nintendo gaming for follow-up statements. Thank you very much.
Okay, so
We'll do this together.
You brought up a couple of good points. I do want to speak to the first thing that you started saying is that you spoke a lot about the potential of where modern games could lead, but that's pie in the sky. That's stuff that hasn't happened yet. You can't bring things that haven't happened yet into the argument. Also, Amiibo. That's a cool gimmick, but there's really not too much that Amiibo have added to my gameplay experience, at least. You also brought up graphics and Nintendo. Retro graphics are better than modern graphics. 2D graphics are ageless. If they looked good then, which many of them did, they look good now. 3D graphics are time-locked. If they look good now, just wait 5 years. Look at the Wii graphics. If you go back and play a Wii game, it will look horrible, and it's going to be the same with the way the Switch looks. Speaking of graphics, do you remember when Nintendo led the graphics industry? Oh yeah, it was the entire retro era. As soon as they hit GameCube, all the other companies took over. Most games look the same now anyway, and Nintendo has lost a lot of their polish and shine when it comes to graphics. A lot of their new stuff looks like everybody else's new stuff. Music is the same as graphics. I would rather listen to the Link to the Past soundtrack than the Breath of the Wild soundtrack. Breath of the Wild soundtrack is boring. Let me list a few games. Super Mario Bros., Legend of Zelda, Donkey Kong 64. Anybody in here could probably hum a few bars of at least a couple of those. Now, let me list a few more. Super Mario 3D World, big seller. Breath of the Wild, massive seller. Donkey Kong Country Tropical Freeze, critical success. Do you hear people humming those tunes? No, you don't. Maybe a few die-hard fans out there, but you're not going to find too much on that.
I think that the graphics arguments you're presenting would work with most other companies. However, I know Nintendo is very good about going with artistic representations of games rather than realistic looking of games. If someone's trying to make a game look realistic on the Nintendo 64, the GameCube, the Wii even, yeah, those are going to look dated in a while. But I think Nintendo does such a good job of imbuing their games, making them look like a painting, like Skyward Sword, for example, that the modern Nintendo games, they're going to look good in the future. I think that argument would work better on a different company. Simeon, what do you say for blowing on cartridges? I think that blowing on cartridges means that the cartridges aren't aging well. They weren't maybe R&D'd enough. Nintendo was so... If you guys never knew why the NES looks the way it does, it looks like a VCR because they were cautious about introducing video games to the main everyday average market because video games had a bad rap. So they disguised it like a VCR. That's why the cartridge goes in. You got to press it down. And because they went to those lengths to hide the fact that it was a video game, they created a mechanism that ultimately started failing 5 to 10 to 20 years later, and now you can barely play an original NES.
Well, actually, if you took any sort of care of your NES cartridges, you're going to be fine. And also, that's part of the experience, okay? Come on, what parent is not going to want to show their kids the NES and have it work perfectly fine the first time? Nobody's going to want that. You have to have part of the experience. This is what we had to do, kids, to get it to work. And it's part of the experience.
I prefer that not to be a part of my experience.
Okay, well, that's not everybody. You mentioned DLC, and I figured that you would bring online into this. But let me tell you all of the reasons why online is such a detriment to gaming. Number one, we lost secrets. Secrets are not a secret anymore. The internet has ruined that. There are leaks before the game is released. Before, we had to pass by word of mouth on the playground. Well, I mean, I was homeschooled, but theoretically, they could be passed around from friend to friend by word of mouth. That's exciting. Number two, cheats are pointless, especially if you're playing an online game. Cheats were a lot of fun back in the day. Now, not so much. Number three, DLC has become a cop-out to gouge customers. Absolutely. We see that. Season passes also gouge customers in an attempt to artificially prolong a game's life. What happens when a company stops supporting a game? You can't play them anymore. Classics are forever. You don't have to worry about online functionality ever. Online gaming is classist at best. What happens when a company stops supporting a game? Well, you can't play it anymore. Online is just another expense. Adding an extra bill or two with Nintendo, that's 2 extra bills that you have to pay just for online
Which 2
functionality.
extra bills?
internet bill and Nintendo Online.
Okay.
You have to pay 2 extra. I live in an RV in Otis Orchards, okay? I don't have access to online available. As soon as my high-speed data runs out on my phone, I'm poop out of luck. Don't even get me started about the online community aspect, okay? The online community is not great. There's a reason that Nintendo's voice chat service sucks, and it's because the online community is toxic. And even if all of these were taken care of, Nintendo's implementation of online has always been lackluster. Wii was a nightmare to get online. Shovelware in the eShop was everywhere. Do we have enough time to laugh at the Weather Channel? No, we don't. The things that the Wii's online worked best for was Netflix, which actually took you away from gaming. Wii's online support was a little bit better, but for what games? Smash Bros, Mario Maker, Mario Kart 8, that's it. Also Me versus Dead.
Thank you, Simeon. Isn't it telling that someone who has to defend retro gaming needs to research for days and days and print out multiple pages and practically read off of them to come up with good arguments?
Oh,
I got
well researched.
I got a few bullet points here.
How terrible.
Let's talk about chords for
Okay,
a minute,
let's talk
shall
about
we?
chords.
Controller cords, those were always a problem. They would get tangled. I've seen people get tattoos on their back of NES controller cords tangled up. There's always a problem. These days you can play on the comfort of your couch. You can sit however you want. You can have a Joy-Con on each side. You don't even have to hold your hands together getting carpal tunnel or cutting your hand on a sharp NES controller. There were also complicated cords for audiovisual. These days, you want to plug your Switch in, you take a nice HDMI cord, you put it right into the side of your TV. What did you have to do back in the day? You had to do some kind of like a screwing in cord.
I think that says more about the TV technology than Nintendo's technology.
And Simeon, we haven't
Yes.
talked much about handhelds.
No, we haven't.
And that's probably intentional on your part, but handhelds back in the day were so much worse because they had no backlights. You had to have a flashlight or you had to plug something in to even be able to see your game. In the old days, Nintendo barely let you see your own handheld video games, Simeon.
Again, part of the experience, playing it in the back car, waiting for the street lights to pass. Those are good memories, man.
I think that sounds like a stretch. Simeon, you do not even know when Super Mario Bros. Came out. Back in the day, there was so much less structure. The video game industry was new, and there weren't international, even national street dates and stuff like that. Basically, the stores would just get the stuff whenever they got them. You couldn't really plan ahead. You couldn't really save up to buy new games because you never really knew when they were going to be available. These days, there are Nintendo Directs where Nintendo gets to share with us their marketing, their future plans. There's things like E3 that tell us when things are going to come out. You can pre-order them. You can preload them on your console if you want to. There's no guesswork. You'd have to basically be lucky if you wanted to go to a store and see a game that you wanted to play and happen to have enough money to pay for it at that time.
Okay. On handheld consoles, a lot of people play games at home now. If they're playing video games, they're either playing them at home or they're playing them on their phones. And it's two different demographics. The handheld consoles, also, with Game Boy, it never got better than Tetris and Pokemon Red and Blue, and Pokemon Gold and Silver. Those are some of Nintendo's best-selling games.
Audience questions are coming up in a few minutes, by the way.
Okay, what else did you bring up? Oh, you brought up Super Mario Bros., the best-selling game for 20 years straight. And that's a great game. Also, I wanted to say that the SNES, we haven't talked too much about the SNES, but the SNES is basically the greatest hits of Nintendo. If you're going to pick one console that is above all the rest, it is the SNES. Super Mario World is fantastic. I would rather play Super Mario World now than any of the new Super Mario Bros. Games. Super Metroid, okay? You cannot forget about Super Metroid, one of the greatest 2D games ever made. It looks great, sounds great, absolutely fantastic. Super Mario Kart, absolute blast even now. I love going back and playing Super Mario Kart now because I don't have to deal with the blue shell. Donkey Kong Country 2, Kirby Superstar, Kirby's Dream Land 3, Super Street Fighter 2, Turbo Hyper Fighters World Warriors New Fighters Deluxe Edition, and of course the best loved Pantendo RPGs, Dragon Quest, Final Fantasy VI, Chrono Trigger, Super Mario RPG, Earthbound, Mother 3. Those games cannot be beat by anything that the current consoles have. You mentioned the Wii. Lots of people have Wii. Lots of people play Wii Sports. That's the reason people have Wii. That's it.
I have 2 more points. Then if Simeon wants to close up with anything, we'll be taking questions at this microphone in a couple minutes. So thanks for lining up. We'll get to you soon. Games were shorter back then. Developers had to artificially lengthen the amount of time that you were able to play a game by increasing the difficulty, making things like ways that you could die, cheap deaths, because this came from the arcade era. It was definitely influenced by when they wanted to get your quarters. Games were shorter, they had to fit on a tiny little memory card in a cartridge. So these days, your investment will last you a lot longer. Speaking of investments, my final point here is that you were getting ripped off back in the old days. You may not have noticed it, but especially when you factor in inflation, you look back at a $200 brand new Nintendo Entertainment System, that was actually costing you $450 in today's money. You'd have to work the same amount of hours to be able to afford a console. So video gaming has actually never been cheaper, never been more affordable. I think that's one of the best things that modern Nintendo has going for them. They don't really raise their prices. It's cheaper than ever. In fact, I have on this phone a recording of my opponent speaking about video game prices. Listen to this.
Especially back in the Super Nintendo era where they were murdering our wallets and Nintendo, basically what you were doing is when you went to buy a game, I would hope that every time somebody bought a game, you took your wallet out, put it on the counter, and the person there took a knife and just stabbed your wallet. I hope that they got at least that, at least a show out of the deal, because that is so much money.
I rest my case.
I can't lie, that was pretty good. On the affordability, NESs, SNESs, go to a pawn shop, get one for $10, $20. Am I? Huh? Well, yeah, that's now. Classic gaming is still great now. You said that there were ways of artificially prolonging life. That's what DLC is. In closing, I believe I have shown that classic games are timeless. Nothing in the past 15 years has surpassed what reigned supreme in the 80s and 90s. Even if I were to give you that Nintendo's last 2 years were pretty good, okay, Switch is okay, you still have to deal with the Wii and the Wii U. You could pick any 2 years in the classic age and they'd still be better. The classics from the NES, SNES, N64, and yes, the Game Boy may be the old men of Nintendo, but they're ready to take these new consoles to school and teach them a lesson from the school of hard knocks.
All right, we'll be answering your questions for the next 10 minutes or so.
So, this is a point that can help both sides. What do you think about updates for games? So now in the modern era, if something is even a cartridge or downloaded, the developers can now update it to fix things, add patches, add content, not DLC, but like to the base game.
Yeah.
What can you guys discuss
What
that
do you think
point?
about updates? Sure. So updates do have their pros and cons. The ability to patch a game after it's out has been a great help to developers. It's let them fix glitches and things like that so it doesn't ruin people's experiences. Sometimes old games are just broken and there's nothing a company can do about it after it's shipped. It's also allowed developers to be lazier and not exactly finish their game before it needs to ship, and the deadlines get pushed back closer and closer. They get less time to work on it. Thankfully, though, today we're debating Nintendo, and Nintendo never ships an unfinished game. So all that they've been able to do with updates has been help.
I think that it's a good point that you're allowed to do updates now because they can ship and do ship unfinished games, and that's not
Like?
like Smash Bros. If you watch the first footage of Smash Bros. Being played in a tournament, and you watch how Bayonetta takes Ridley off the top of the screen, just like that, the very first time the game's picked up, you can just feel everybody shaking their head going, the game's not ready, it's not done. And when it shipped, it still had issues, and they still balance it all the time. I think that shows that there is that seal of approval doesn't exist anymore for a reason. Oh, we can deal with that later. The classics didn't need it. They didn't need it. They didn't need an update, and they still don't need an update.
Thanks, Tom.
Yeah, thank you, Tom. Another hand for Tom. Good question.
So we're so far it seems like you've kind of been debating a bit.
Right up to your mouth.
Yep, debating a bit vaguely over kind of things that affect every game for Nintendo, but I wanted to see what your opinions were on a kind of condensed environment over something that they have basically remade and redone and made changes to that are affected by modernization of video games, and that is Mike Tyson's Punch-Out.
Oh, yeah, that's right. I can talk on this. Okay, yeah. Mike Tyson is no longer in Mike Tyson's Punch-Out. What's with that? You can't have Mike Tyson's Punch-Out, NBA Jam, Tecmo Super Bowl. You can't be playing Bo Jackson in Tecmo Super Bowl anymore? Come on. The whole thing with sports games especially, games now don't last. Scott said that you're stuck with a game if you bought it now. Well, it's a good thing that games now you're not stuck with, because you're going to have to update them in 6 months anyway. Madden's only going to be current for 1 year, and then you're going to have to get rid of it. So yeah, Mike Tyson's not in Mike Tyson's Punch-Out anymore. You can't have that anymore.
I'm thankful that Nintendo has been around long enough and is able to remake their games and correct mistakes from the past, like letting an ear-biting creep like Mike Tyson into one of their titles.
Who doesn't like Mike Tyson? Who doesn't like Mike Tyson?
Mind if I add in one small thing?
Okay.
In regards to this, because I was talking about the comparison between Doc's Punch-Out as for the Wii and Mike Tyson's. But just talking about the Punch-Out for the NES, that was also ported to the Switch, so you're talking about the missing Dream instead of Tyson himself. There is a very noticeable thing that you guys were talking about earlier, which was wireless controllers. We actually talking about a lot of the benefits for wireless controllers and how they're very comfortable and they're very helpful. But being the game that it is, Mike Tyson's Punch-Out, when especially reported, can have some issues, especially on people like the speedrun community, in regards to latency with wireless controllers, even though it may be just a few milliseconds. Like, for example, in the blindfolded run of Mike Tyson's Punch-Out, you start off with a class Joe, and there's usually a buffer stack you can do, and it's based off of sound, obviously, because you're blindfolded, and it follows with 21 uppercuts and then 4 side punches, which will eventually knock out class Joe. But if you are even a frame late with these buffers, and with the audio delay, I've found that if I don't use my Pro Controller wired up, that the delay will cause a lot of issue.
I think I know who he's voting for.
Yeah, Scott, do you want to talk about wireless controllers anymore?
The jury's out on delay. I think that I've heard it both ways. Some people say that wireless controllers do cause some lag, and some people say the technology is good enough that it's actually faster than corded controllers now. I haven't exactly done the speed test myself to be able to tell for sure, but it sounds like you have, and in that case it messed you up, so I'm sorry about that.
It's just another problem that wireless controllers have.
Hi, Darth Vader. All right, Samurai Steve.
Yep.
Thank you.
Thank you.
First off, I want to say it's really awesome when Darth Vader just walks through the room.
Yeah. Didn't hear it.
That was amazing. This comment in question is directed to Scott. I've been teaching karate for about 30 years. Really, I am. That's what I do. And about 30 years ago, my karate students were commanded and very skilled They're really precise. When I push them hard, that's something really technical. They push right through it. And you made a comment yourself. Earlier you said, I tried playing these old games and they were so hard, and I gave up after about 5 minutes.
Yeah.
And, in karate, the first thing we teach is endurance versus giving up. And we teach them not to give up when things are hard. 30 years ago, my students were like, I give them something hard to do, and they go, well, I beat the second level of Super Mario, no problem. Or Mario Brothers, I can get through this. And they would. My students now, they come to class and I'm getting something hard, and they're like, man, this is so hard, can I just insert a cheat code on my, get through this karate class because it's so hard and I don't give up. And they do. And people used to ask me, how long does it take the average person to get a black belt? 30 years ago, when we had Nintendo, Super Nintendo, I tell them, 3 to 5 years is the problem. Now, when a kid asks me how long does the average person take to get a black belt, I tell them, the average person doesn't get a black belt anymore. Because, unless you can do an original game. So that's kind of the comment. So my question for you, Scott, is, are you satisfied with your gaming experience, knowing that it's really easy and it requires no skill? And if it's hard, you just bump in a cheat code that you download off the internet.
Okay.
And does that give you satisfaction anymore? I mean, especially knowing that you can't beat the second level of Super Mario Brothers.
Okay, great.
So that's just really got, I'm hoping to grow a new generation of people that don't want to give up, but I think I'm losing because of the modern game.
Great question. I will respond. Lady in the pink dress, you will be our last question for the day because we need to get on to voting. So sorry about that, Superman. Yeah, great question, Steve. I think that older games definitely were harder, but like I said, I think some of it was artificial difficulty, dying cheaply. I think games are still difficult. They make you work a little harder for it, though, and they're more skill-based. Like getting a battle royale in Fortnite. That takes hours and hours of practice, and you're competing like an esport against other actual players in real life, testing your skill, and only the best people win every time. So there is still difficulty, it just comes in kind of a different package, in my opinion.
And I'd like to add 2 things to what you're saying. Is one is Scott has beaten the lost levels before, so he does have the skills. He is a hardcore gamer, and also I'd like to direct people, if I have the opportunity to Matt Pat on Game Theory. He recently did a video about how games artificially make it easier on you. They show you, you'll play through a level, and then once you play through it again, there's less enemies because they don't want you to give up. I just wanted to throw that out there. And that's a more recent thing with more armor.
All right, our last question.
I'm a little younger. I'm only barely 21 months, so I may be partial to newer gaming, but I did grow up playing a lot of classic. I have an Atari, the Sega Atari. I have an NES, I have an N64. That was my first console. My grandmother is the one who had that. Not my older brother, not my dad. My grandmother is still the staple gamer of our household and family. And so she taught all the girls how to game because otherwise I probably would have never played video games because it wasn't a girly thing to do when I was growing up. But I actually got really into speedrunning, so there are still things I teach my grandma. She could play Spyro in her sleep. We didn't get 100%, 120%. She was that good. She's played those games that many times. So then we look at that, those classic games have those replayability, even someone who's now in their 70s who still plays those games. But I still can teach her new things because I learned them on the internet. Otherwise, I might not have had that knowledge about the glitches, how to do the speed runs. And then obviously things like Games Done Click has the Metroid runs where they do the animals and they donate to charity with it. So to say that necessarily the internet has ruined classic gaming, I would say maybe it's incorrect. And when it comes to things like all the positivity it's done, all the sharing it's done, and making it so accessible to people, and emulators, ROMs, all those things that are only viable because of programming technology and runners available on the internet, those are things I can obtain without having to pay $3,000 for a copy. So it's, oh dear, sorry. The internet, I think, even though it's toxic and nasty, I think that maybe when it does come to the benefits it has provided in the ways of innovation, like, I don't know if we'd all be satisfied still playing one pixel at a time when it comes to soccer.
Okay.
Can I respond to that real quick?
Yes, thank
'Cause
you
I think-
for your intelligent and well-articulated defense of modern gaming.
I actually really appreciate that because that's true. The internet has not completely destroyed everything gaming. Games done quick. There's so many charity events. Twitch streamers do charity. But also notice what games are most popular on those charity events. It's the classic games. So, thank you. All right.
Okay.
So what's next? We vote now, and then.
Did you get through all 17 pages here?
I didn't. I left some of it on the table. I had more stuff to go over. But,
Okay. Well, let's explain how voting will work for a second. So today's vote does actually have implications as far as this stage. We prepared public humiliation for the loser. Different humiliation if I lose, different humiliation if Simeon loses. We're not going to explain exactly what that is because we don't want to influence anybody's vote. So, how are we going to vote, Simeon?
by raise of hands. So if we'll do classic first. If you think that classic won the debate, raise your hand.
Just one hand,
One hand.
not to Steve. Okay.
Samurai Steve has his. Okay, hands down. We might have to have your hands back up in a second. Raise your hand if you think modern gaming won the debate. Oh yeah! Oh yeah! Oh yeah!
Wait, most people didn't raise their hands at all.
Raise your hand if you didn't raise your hand at all.
Just one.
What? 4. Okay.
Oh,
All right. So
man.
I do want to say this to my wife, who didn't believe that I could win. Haha. She believes in me as a person, but she didn't believe that I could win this debate. So.
Wait, are we sure? Do we need a revote? Yes. Do you think modern should have won? Oh. Okay. Simeon prepared something that can publicly humiliate me.
Do you guys know what a speech jammer is? A speech jammer is an app on your phone that you can get that loops your voice back to you so that it makes it very difficult to speak. I have a favorite poem that Scott likes to read me, and I would like him to read the poem Carmen Possum.
This is from the best loved poems of the American people. It has nothing to do with Nintendo or gaming.
Nothing,
or
absolutely
anything
nothing.
today. So where is this? Right here?
If you do want to check us out online, we do have footage, or maybe that was a Patreon exclusive.
Yeah.
The DK rap. Scott
So-
doing the DK rap with a speech jammer.
And speech jammers really do get to me. You'll hear. But just so you know, this is a weird poem to begin with. So
It's half
like-
English, half Latin. Like every line is half English, half Latin.
So for example, the Nox was lit by lux of Luna, and 'twas a Nox most opportuna. Okay, so you're not gonna understand me no matter what. But okay. Are you guys ready?
Let's do it.
Are you guys ready?
Alright. Go ahead and start talking.
Okay. The Nox was lit by lux of Luna, and 'twas a Nox most opportuna to catch a possum or a kuna, for nix was scattered o'er this mundus.
Keep going. It's longer than that, guys. Don't clap.
Less delay?
Less delay?
Yeah, I think you could mess me up a little more.
Okay, let's try it. It's
You can adjust how long the delay is. Okay.
It's already at 17 milliseconds. Let's
Okay.
see if I can go to.
It's a weird poem, right, guys? I'm sorry
11.
Simeon did this to me and to all of you. But brevier legs had Candace never. Quan had hick dog at bonus clever. Okay, I can do this. Some used to say in Soltum Jokum, Quaterfield was too small locum.
So that is the end of what we're doing today, guys. We are Two Button Crew. Check us out online. We stream occasionally on Tuesdays. And do you have anything else to add?
No. Thanks for voting. Try to vote better next time. And hope to see you guys next year. Enjoy the rest of Comicon.
Enjoy the con.
Good job, Simeon.
Good job, Scotty.